All right, so welcome to the next lesson on ancient Rome. So in this lesson, we're going to start actually getting into the expansion of Rome, like how they go from just being the little guy into a big guy. Because if you're noticing, I hope I said this in one of the last videos, now I'm forgetting if I did, but we believe, or at least from the records that we have, the city of Rome was founded in the mid 700s BC, 753 BC to be exact. And now you see me showing this map where Rome is at 391 BC. So, we got roughly close to 400 years here, 350, 400 years of time where Rome is there. So that's a long time to just be there. And, they haven't grown a ton. They haven't become this massive empire yet. They've been just kind of doing their thing. They're a little bit on the special side because they went from the whole, 100 and so years before this, 509 BC, they turned into the Republic that we talked about in the last lesson, and they're doing well there. They're a unique city because they're inviting all people to come there. You just whoever you are, if you reject somewhere else, come. You can be here now. There are some growing pains with that, like I said last time, but they're doing good. And then all of a sudden things change. By the way, they're having wars with their neighbors, and they do pretty good. They're able to hold their own pretty well, especially against the Etruscans, who are definitely the more dominant group of people on the Italian peninsula at this time. But again, one leading up to something happens in 391 BC that just changes the Roman mindset. And from this point on, they just start expanding. So again, Rome is just really, it's not all of this, by the way. It's just this area right here that you're seeing. But then all of a sudden, they get bigger. Well, oops, a little too far, but they get bigger. Now they have pretty much the entire Italian peninsula. Then they really explode, and they're getting pretty much the Western Mediterranean. Heck, they just took over Greece, the entire Greek world. Now, this is in less than 200 years here. Then they keep getting bigger. This is massive. By the way, this is about the time, the conquests of Caesar and Pompey and Crassus. And then by AD 14, during the time of Caesar Augustus, and by the way, at this point, I should go back here. At this point, this is about where you see the transition from Rome being a republic and turning into an empire. They're no longer a republic at this point. Something that, by the way, we're afraid of. We're afraid of transitioning from a republic into an empire. And one of the things that's even more scary about that is the transition from republic to an empire is in many ways what saved Rome, that enabled it to continue on for hundreds of more years. So as Americans, we don't really want to see that because, yes, things were safer, but, the Romans definitely lost their true freedoms, you could say, under the republic they were under. But they did shoot themselves in the foot. We'll talk about that later. Anyways, but they keep growing. They get bigger. And this is the largest extent that they get to by about AD 117 or CE 117. So I won't explain like the little lines off to the side, but it's just, holy cow. This empire stands the test of time. And really it stays at this extent, this power for a good 200-300 years, where they're just this big and this powerful. So I'll go through that one more time. So again, from 753 BC up to 391 BC, just teeny tiny. This area, don't really have this thing. Then something happens, and all of a sudden, boom, they start taking everybody out. They just keep going, keep going, keep going, and keep going. It's pretty incredible to see this. You don't see this happen much throughout history. It's one of those things that definitely makes Rome unique, where not only do they get big quick, or I shouldn't say quick, but they expand consistently, but they also, it's in the idea that they don't fall either. They just endure for a very, very long time. Now, why does this happen? What happened in 391 BC that was such a big deal to the Romans? Well, their city gets destroyed. Well, I shouldn't say destroyed, it gets sacked. Almost destroyed. Basically a marauding group of barbarians called the Gauls, up from basically the Gauls. These Gauls are basically from France and northern Italy. They had basically wreaked havoc through a lot of the Etruscan towns as well. Rome actually sent an army to go help out some of their neighbors against them, ended up getting defeated. Then the Gauls, kind of out of spite and vengeance, comes down and lays siege to Rome, beats the Roman army there. Rome doesn't have a chance to raise a new army. Just all of a sudden, just things are bad. Even though they have this foundation of power that we talked about earlier, and the idea that everybody's willing to go fight. Well, these Gauls, they had some advantages to them as well. Like, it's one thing to be able to get a lot of soldiers together, yes, which is awesome, and have a lot of people to pull from, which Rome had, which was awesome. But they did not have, you could say, the military organization that was really needed, and there was some problems within just how the military was organized. Well, I just said that, how the military, how do you put it, how their military traditions went. I'm not going to go into that too much, but basically there were some problems there where they just could not stand up to these Gauls in the short amount of time that they needed to. So basically, there's this whole story about how, I mean, Rome could have ended right here, by the way. If the Gauls really wanted to, they could have ended Rome. Luckily for the Romans, the Gauls were just there for basically, to get stuff, to get the treasure and leave, to loot the city and leave type thing. And in order to get the Gauls to leave, the Romans basically said, hey, we'll pay you to leave. Please just go. And there's a story about how, like, the king of the Gauls, of this Gallic tribe, agrees to basically leave if a certain amount of gold is paid to him. He's like, hey, you have to pay me this much in gold, and he puts weights on the scale, and the Romans have to put gold on the scale to have to basically, even out the weights. And at a certain point, as they're about to even out the weights, the Gallic king then, I can't remember his name, I wish I could remember his name, he takes out his sword and puts it on the scales as well, and of course it makes his side go down, and the Romans like, what are you doing? We agreed to this. He's like, doesn't matter, I won. I can do whatever I want to, so you better keep putting more gold on there so it equals the weight of my sword, kind of the victory goes to the spoils type thing. So the Romans grudgingly put more gold on there to basically pay this Gallic king. And the Gauls do leave, and the Romans are there just left to pick up the pieces. Like this, it's just a bad time for them. By the way, what I'm about to say is not something you need to write down. This is when you see one of the great heroes of Rome kind of arise and kind of bring Rome up out of the ashes. His name is Camillus. Anyways, if you want to read about him, interesting. He's one of these great heroes of Roman history. But basically, the Romans realized, holy cow, we almost went down. We need to be better at this. Either we need to change some stuff, or we could probably go down again to someone else, or the same guys that they decide to come down. So they decide to adapt. And this is a key thing. Like this is one of those concepts that I write up on the board to keep up all year long in the classroom. And is that basically that societies and civilizations, nations that learn to adapt and keep adapting will survive a heck of a lot longer. And those basically societies, civilizations, and nations that don't adapt, choose not to adapt, and just feel like the world should just always basically be what they want it to be, essentially become entitled, that's a good sign that you're about to fall. So we're going to talk about what the Romans do to adapt, because this is one of the key things of why they last so long, why they endure so long, is that they adapt. So in this case, it has everything to do with the military. I mean, they already have this idea that, yes, they have this willing populace, mostly willing populace, I should say, that are these volunteer soldiers. They're taught from birth to defend Rome. They have this sense of discipline. They're supposed to have these high morals to them. Again, realistically, that isn't necessarily the case, but this is it is a major foundation for them. They do have all these citizen soldiers, in fact, free armies, you could say, and a very large population because they do have a lot of land. They just weren't able to organize the population well enough. And one of the things they noticed about the Gallic army is they had great military organization. Even though the Roman army was bigger than they were, they had great military organization. They were able to move around the battlefield and communicate with each other in a way and have the system of leadership within the Gallic army that just was very impressive. So the Romans decided, let's take those lessons we learned from the Gauls, use what they did well, use what we do well, and come up with something just new, you could say. And this is where we get what is called the legion system. So, before they had this idea like, okay, every family contribute the men. Well, now it's just like, instead of being kind of in these hodgepodge groups of men and in these large phalanx lines, they actually had copied a lot of the Greek system of fighting at this point. They're like, you know what, we need to be more mobile on the battlefield like those Gauls were. We need to be able to meet that challenge. And so basically, the legion system is based off this idea that when they would gather their armies together, they would have these groups of men, anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 men, and that was basically a core group of guys called a legion. And when they get their armies together, a normal army for Rome would be like 3 or 4 legions, 15 to 20,000 men. But there are times when they get armies, like a really massive army for the Romans would be 8 legions, 8, 9 legions, 40, 45,000 men or so, up to 50,000. And there's times when they get some armies where they're in kind of dire need and they just need that massive army, and they get 16, 17 legions together. Just like 70, 80,000 men, just kind of crazy amounts of numbers, especially for antiquity. But it's not just the idea that you have these legions of 5,000 to 6,000 men that are gathered together. It's how each legion is organized and how they communicate and collaborate with each other. So, basically, giving you more of a breakdown of how this looks, and I'll show you a little diagram in a bit. How this looks. Within each of these legions, they were grouped into boxes of men that were called maniples, and each maniple was actually 2 separate boxes in a way, of anywhere from 60 to 80 men each, which means a maniple was anywhere from 120 to 160 men, which inside the maniple you had 2 groups called centuries, anywhere from 60 to 80 men each being led by a centurion. What this allowed for is each maniple could basically move as a group, and if need be, the maniple could split into 2 littler groups to move as need be to meet the needs of the battlefield. If you're going to get outflanked or something like that, you had the leadership. When I say you had the leadership, I had enough leaders there to be able to, that were trained well enough to see what's going on in the battlefield and to say, okay, we need to move here. Hey, you guys defend that way, we'll defend this way, or we both need to charge now. Just this system stands the test of time, by the way. The stuff I'm telling you about right now, a lot of different names are given it over time. Instead of legions today, we say divisions, but we basically use the same military organization today. And this whole idea of fighting in box shapes, that lasts until the 1800s, up until you get to early 1900s with World War I, where machine guns kind of ruined the idea of being boxed groups of men. But if you've ever seen stuff like the American Civil War, we walk around in boxes of men on the battlefield, Napoleonic Wars, things like that. That is straight going back down to this military organization that the Romans came up with that is very versatile, very mobile. Meaning that, hey, if you're not just one big long line of phalanx guys all grouped together, but you're kind of these boxes, you can come together, split apart, do what's needed to, hearing certain, the bugle horn sounds and things like that saying, hey, you guys need to go do this right now, and it's almost instantaneous. We can hear the calls for you to be ordered to do a certain thing. It's pretty impressive, and this is how the Romans adapt. Now, in the army, each soldier is called a legionnaire. So this is where we get that famed term, the legionnaire, from this whole formation of the legions. Now, before I talked about the legionnaires, I'm going to get to them in a second, and the idea of what each individual soldier did. But I want you to look at this. It's one of the best graphics I could find. I was thinking of drawing up my own, but just down to time. I didn't have the time to draw one myself. But I felt like this did a pretty good job of explaining it. Each square you see there, the solid square you see there, is a maniple. And so in a way, each solid red square you see there is divided into 2 smaller squares that can basically maneuver as best they can, although they do need to stay together as best as possible, but they can maneuver into different shapes if they need to. Or if need be, I hope you can see this, at some point when you want to outflank the enemy, hey, you can make a bugle call and you can get these 2 maniples, a couple hundred guys to go around this way. If the enemy racks, okay, then you can call them back pretty quickly. It's a very, very versatile army organization. I guess I should explain simply just what you're looking at. This front line here are skirmishers, basically a bunch of guys with some short throwing javelins to basically mess with the enemy at the very beginning and just kind of test them out a bit. Now, these next 3 lines, this changes over time, just how this works. In the beginning, you had this idea Let's see if I'm getting this right. Actually, I can't. I'm now remembering. I'm not remembering. I can't remember. Well, this becomes, there's a lot of reforms done to this. Like they adapt this a lot. And when I say adapt, they don't adapt what you're looking at here, but they adapt who is where. So in the beginning, all right, I shouldn't say in the beginning because I can't remember which one is the beginning one, but I'll just say one of the very effective things they would do is they would take a lot of the young men. So they're trained, but not veterans. These aren't guys that, have been through a bunch of wars and things like that. But essentially they're sent to the front of the line to kind of prove themselves. Then, behind them, if need be, to fill in the gaps or to relieve them if they're not able to get the job well enough done, you have groups of people called principes. These are your veteran warriors. They can hold the line. And if for some reason that the veterans cannot hold the line, this middle line right here, then you have, how do I put this, like the really hardcore veterans, much older guys, but guys that they definitely stand their ground if need be, to come in and fill in gaps, give these guys a break so that they can kind of rest, regroup, and then come back into the battle. So, I just remembered what I was thinking of earlier. That's what it turned into and became very effective. They changed that from this, where they actually had people it was socioeconomics, basically the people that were not very wealthy, that how do I put this? They weren't heavy infantry. They're more like light infantry. They had enough wealth to basically supply their own kind of light armor, shield, and spear. They're called hastati up at the front. Principes were more heavily armored guys. Triarii were more of kind of like your phalanx spearmen if you just really needed that. They switched that to the idea of like, oh no, we need younger guys up front, but with swords and throwing spears. Saying heavier infantry, hastati are the younger guys are heavy infantry, more heavy infantry that are veterans behind them, sword and shield with throwing spears, and then triarii, older guys with the big spears, more like phalanx style. And then you have what these are as horses on the sides. I hope this is kind of making sense to you. I'm sorry, I know I've been all over the map on this one, but the main idea is this. It is incredibly versatile. Even though they do make changes over time, when they change it from the socioeconomic side to more of like to the experience end of things, they do make changes after that as well. I'll get into that later. But they never change this manipular thing. They never change this idea that, okay, we have boxes of men that understand certain orders, and they're easily be moved around the battlefield and sent to where they need to be at the right time. So it works incredibly well. It doesn't mean they win every battle. They still lose battles, especially when they have a general or a consul over them that does not make some good decisions. But when you have a general who knows what they're doing, or a consul that knows what they're doing, like a Julius Caesar, this becomes a nearly unbeatable type of thing, especially when those men really hold their ground well. So now talking about each individual soldier. In the beginning, like I've mentioned before, each soldier would bring their own weapons and armor. And this weapons and armor wouldn't necessarily look all the same. It's just you bring what you can. And a lot of like I said, in the very beginning, you would have your less wealthy guys up front, with your more heavily armed guys in the back to kind of hold the line if need be. And then they switch that around later on because they realize, just putting guys that don't have as much up front, that's kind of weak. We need to make sure every line is pretty heavy. And so they say, all right, no matter who you are, this is the type of stuff you should have. Wealthy, not wealthy. Just bring the best you can. But if you can't bring enough, then you won't be put into these, like if you don't have enough armor, if you can't bring basically what you're seeing in this picture right here, we can't put you in that front or second line. And we're going to have to use you as kind of reserves. Because in a way you could say it's not fair. It's not effective to kind of have lightly armored guys at places where you need well armored people. So what you're seeing there is like saying, okay, if you're going to be one of these heavy infantry, first line, second line, or third line, this is basically what you need to bring, what you need to get. That is probably a bad reference, like bring your own lunch, make sure you bring your stuff with you. So, you have your helmet, you have your torso armor, you have your throwing javelin, your spear, you have your shield, and you have your short sword. If you have that, then you're good. But each one of those things you're looking at there is actually in itself an adaptation. And the main thing I'm trying to focus on is that this whole idea is that Rome is adapting and reforming their army to meet new challenges, and they continually do this. So, for instance, the helmet they use. They used to use helmets like the Greeks did, these massive helmets that just you couldn't see very well. It was all about just seeing in front of you and just charging forward, just a massive wall of bronze and flesh. And it's not about seeing to the side to side. You just trust the guys on your left and right to do what they're supposed to. But if you're going to be in these maniples and these manipular formations that I just showed you, then you need to be able to see what's going on to the left, what's going on to the right. You need to have that vision. So yes, you make your face more susceptible to injury. Well, they do try to come up with a helmet that just guards you as best as possible, but you need to have that vision. You need to have that peripheral vision. So that's the reason for the helmet you see there. Now, the armor. One of the things, the whole idea about the armor there is it's good protective armor, yes, but it's, again, lacking something that the Greek phalanx hoplite soldiers would have, and that's those shin guards. And they'd have those massive shin guards to guard their legs. The Romans decided to get rid of that. Why? To be more mobile. It sucks to walk around, just even today. People exercise with ankle weights and things like that. You can do a lot better. You can hold a lot more weight on your torso than if you don't have weights on your legs. Let those be as light as possible. So they decide to essentially go with that. Now, they do realize they need to protect their legs a little better, so you see the shield you see there. And that shield was created for multiplicity of reasons. But one of the major ones was to protect your legs. Since it's longer, it guards both your torso and your legs, especially if you're kind of in a crouch. And if you really need to, you can crouch behind that, especially if arrows or javelins coming at you, to fully guard yourself. In fact, something I'd like to show in class, I'm not going to be showing right now, and probably should have got a picture out for this, is, with those shields right there, they would form what's called a testudo. Like these maniples, these blocks of guys would form a testudo where they would all link their shields together on top of and on the sides, so they just have this big box that can repel all type of missile fire, like sling stones, arrows, and javelins, and things like that. And you hit with a big ballista, though, that can get through you. But anyways, it was a pretty dang good adaptation, that testudo formation with that shield. Now, the idea of the curvature of the shield, yes, it kind of envelops you, but it also is this idea that those javelins, those arrows are less likely to stick in your shield. They'll glance off, making it so that, you don't, it's tough to fight when you got something sticking out of your shield, let's put it that way. Now, the sword is also an adaptation. Growing up, I always thought, well, the big swords were the cool ones, and that's always the better thing to have, and you get more reach with it and things like that, these massive two-handed broadswords. But that kind of, like when you think of that, it's more like in the one-on-one type fights. You got a lot of space to you. But in these fights in antiquity, especially in these phalanxes, you're grouped together, and these maniples are grouped together. You don't have much room to swing a sword, and if you do, you really open yourself up to some sort of counter thrust. So it's good to just kind of have your shield in front of you and just jab, jab, jab with a short sword. It was the most effective thing. And then they did a lot of things with the sword itself, like putting grooves in the blade to make it easier to kind of slide into enemy bodies and slide out without getting stuck. I won't go into that too much, but getting kind of the gruesome stuff. But again, these are all adaptations. The last adaptation I want to talk about is that spear. That spear is one of the coolest things ever when I was taught about this. But the idea of that spear is, if you can throw that spear and kill someone, great. Wonderful. Yeah. But what the Romans would do is that they would train at full speed, in formation, throwing that spear just at the right moment to hit the front ranks of the enemy running at you. That takes some timing and some practice to gain that timing. And the idea was this, though, is that you hit the enemy, you have your shields, they have their shields, you kind of come together like that. So, but when they come in, when you're just about to hit them and you throw that spear at them and they raise their shields to kind of deflect them, that spear point is supposed to embed itself into the shield and not just stick out, and it's skinny enough to where it'll usually stick into those shields, but then you have that weight, that ball in the middle that when they bear it down, that would bend it down, and therefore making the shield too unwieldy. You'd have to basically drop it, try to yank the spear out and keep going. But if the Romans are running at you, you don't have time to yank it out, and you really just have to drop your shield right as they hit you, which means Romans get an advantage right at the beginning of battle as they're running at you. Again, amazing adaptation to me. So there's more things I can talk about. Sorry, I should have had that up right there too. But just think of all these adaptations, this military organization, put with the idea that you have the city of men that are just willing to go off to war, that bring their own weapons and armor. They're not asking to be paid. They do it for essentially patriotic duty. This this becomes really a foundation of the overall foundation of power and the ability to expand that the Romans then use. And going back to those maps I showed you at the beginning of this lesson, they just, yeah, they lose battles, but they never lose a war, basically. And anyways, we'll actually get into a lot of these wars they fight next time.